All right, let's just jump right in. People are saying AGI could be here in the next 900 days. Now, that's a huge deal. So the question is, are you and your family ready for what's coming? Today, we're going to look at one potential answer, a blueprint called Ordered Liberty. It's a really comprehensive framework for global reform put together by Darren Lawson Hosking over at themoralgorithm.com. It's a pretty bold vision for a fairer world. So let's break it down.
So before we get into the details, let's start with a really fundamental question, one that kind of sets the stage for this whole conversation. Does our current economic system, actually work for everyone? I think for a lot of us, the answer feels like a pretty clear no. There's this growing sense that maybe, just maybe, the whole system needs a serious rethink.
And you know what? It isn't just a feeling. It's backed by data. Check this out. Pew Research found that a huge majority of people all around the world believe the economic system needs major changes or even a complete overhaul. That's a massive number of people calling for something different. It really sets the stage for new ideas, right? So, what could an alternative even look like? And that brings us right to the core idea we're talking about today, ordered liberty. So what is it? Well, it's a framework from Darren Lawson Hosking at themoralgorithm.com. And the key thing to get here is that it's not about trying to force specific outcomes. Instead, it's all about setting up fair, basic background rules so that everyone has a real shot at participating in society. It's built on 5 key pillars, so let's dive into those.
Okay, so the whole structure of ordered liberty is built on these 5 interconnected pillars. Let's walk through them one by one.
First up, Pillar 1. And you might be surprised, it's not about money, it's not about power, it's about how we think. The whole idea here is that a truly fair society has to start with a solid cognitive foundation, giving every single citizen the tools they need to actually think for themselves.
So how does that work in practice? Well, it's about giving everyone universal training in something called the trivium method. That's basically grammar, logic, and rhetoric. Think of it like a mental toolkit. You learn how arguments are built, how to reason things out clearly, and how to get your own ideas across effectively. The crucial part is this. The government's job isn't to tell you what to think. It's to give you the tools for how to think. It's about building a kind of societal immune system, so we can all spot manipulation and tell a good argument from a bad one.
Okay, so once that cognitive foundation is in place, we move to Pillar 2, which is all about creating a stable economic floor for everyone. This is where we get to our material needs, and it's handled with 3 pretty simple automatic rules.
And these 3 rules are designed to work together, almost like a 3-legged stool. First, you've got an income floor. This is a base income for everyone that's tied to how productive the country actually is. Second, you've credit rules. This means that when banks create new money, it has to go towards productive things, like building a factory or developing new tech, not just fueling speculative bubbles in housing or stocks. And third, there's a capacity response. This is really cool. The system is designed to automatically invest to fix real shortages, which helps prevent those crazy price spikes that hurt the most vulnerable.
All right, Pillar 3. This one tackles a huge issue, concentrated corporate power. The goal here is simple but powerful. Make sure corporations are actually serving the public good, instead of being able to dominate the economy or, warp our political system.
So how would this actually work? Well, a few key rules. First, corporations would only exist because we, the public, grant them a charter. And that charter can be revoked. They don't have some kind of inherent right to exist. Second, there would be size limits to stop any company from becoming too big to fail. And this next one is a real game changer. Absolutely no corporate political spending. The idea is to return free speech rights to actual human beings, not these massive legal entities.
So imagine that. You've got educated citizens, a stable economy, and corporate power is kept in check. The first 3 pillars have set the stage. Now, Pillar 4 is all about participation. It's about creating a whole new way for regular people like you and me to have a direct and, importantly, an informed say in how we're all governed.
The best way to think about this is like jury duty, but for making policy. Citizens would be randomly selected. That's a process called sortition to sit on these special assemblies. And this is where Pillar 1, the education piece, becomes so crucial. Because the people in these assemblies get that critical thinking training. They get to study complex issues, they talk to experts, and then they deliberate on what the policy should be. The hope is that this creates a transparent, informed, and, well, a much more legitimate way to govern ourselves, and maybe, just maybe, start rebuilding some trust in the whole process. And that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, Pillar 5. This one is all about making it last. It's designed to lock in the other 4 pillars, to give the whole framework really deep roots so these changes aren't just temporary.
So how do you do that?
You basically future-proof the system. The core ideas of ordered liberty would be written right into the Constitution, into the highest law of the land. And to change them, you need a supermajority vote. What this does is it shields the whole framework from short-term political shifts or intense lobbying from special interests. The goal is that future generations would inherit a fair system by default.
Okay, so those are the 5 pillars. The big question now is, what would a world that actually operates on these principles look like? The source material paints a really stark contrast between that vision and the path we're currently on.
I mean, the stakes couldn't be clearer, right? You look at the path we're on now, and you see rising inequality, one financial crisis after another, social unrest. It's a recipe for instability. But the ordered liberty path, that envisions a completely different world. One with way less poverty, more inclusive growth, and a society where our incentives are actually lined up to help us tackle our biggest problems head on.
But look, no system is perfect. And a responsible analysis has to ask the tough questions, right? You have to look for the potential flaws, the blind spots, the unintended consequences. And to its credit, the source material does exactly that, using a really fascinating philosophical tool. It's a thought experiment called the veil of ignorance. Here's the idea. Imagine you get to design the rules for a brand new society. The only catch, you have no idea who you're going to be in that society. You could be rich, you could be poor, healthy, sick, you just don't know. From that completely impartial position, you're obviously going to design the fairest possible rules for everyone. So, using that lens, what potential problems pop?
Well, this perspective brings up some really important questions. For instance, that educational pillar. Does its focus on the trivium really work for people who are neurodivergent? And what about the economic pillar? Does a single, one-size-fits-all income floor really make sense when the cost of living in a big city is so different from a small rural town?
And here's another big one. What about rigidity? Remember how Pillar 5 locks everything into the Constitution? Well, could that make the system too inflexible? Could it stop us from adapting to massive, unforeseen challenges? You know, things like the transformative AI we talked about at the very beginning, or the impacts of rapid climate change? Adaptability is absolutely crucial.
So, as you can see, this is a really deep and thought-provoking proposal. And honestly, what we've covered here today, it's just scratching the surface. This is really just the starting point. The real journey begins when you start to explore and engage with these ideas for yourself.
When you boil it all down, the entire mission comes back to this one goal. It's a pretty powerful and incredibly clear vision for what a society could be aiming for.
So, if anything we've talked about today has sparked your curiosity, the next step is pretty simple. Go directly to the source and form your own opinion. You can find the entire framework plus all the detailed analysis from the author Darren Lawson Hosking over at themoralalgorithm.com. And to help you start your own journey, the site has this really interesting interactive tool. It's called the Moral Algorithm tool. To find it, just go to the top menu and look for One Voice. Click that, and you can start to engage with these ideas directly. We really encourage you to check it out for yourself. And hey, if you found any of this valuable, please share this information with your friends.